Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Big Data, Big Dollars, Accounts Receivable and Revenue. I am Lindsay Falconer with Automation Services, the U.S. distributor of IDEA data analysis software and Caseware Monitor. I will be moderating this session and the Q&A at the end. Our speaker today is Katrina Julia from FitLife Creation. Her specialty is to help identify operational inefficiencies through data analytics. This is the final part of our 5-part series on maximizing profitability. She has walked us through the top tests to apply to travel, payroll, and accounts payable data. If you have been watching us throughout all of our webcasts, we appreciate you joining us again. If you have only been able to join us for this webcast, we have recorded all of the previous webcasts and we'll send them to you via email within a week or so of this one. So you'll have all 5 webcast links in one place to access for future reference. If you have any questions, please type them in the question tab on the right side of your screen. Most of the questions will be answered at the end of the webcast. We are not offering CPE for this webcast. We have a lot to cover, and I am pleased to have Katrina here with us for our final webcast. So I will let her take over.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Hope everyone's having a great afternoon. And thank you to everyone that's been with us for the entire journey or part of the journey, and hope you've definitely gotten some value out of this series. And just for those of you that may be joining us for the first time, here's just a bit of insight about some of my experiences. Feel free to check out more information. And so what is today's session going to look like? We're going to be looking at big data analytics, and change is hard. So for those of you that have been along with us, will notice that this initial part is repetitive. And just to give you a refresher, because I know we've all slept since then. And then we'll be focusing on AR and revenue, and schemes, strategy, and an example. And then I'll be giving a recap of cost, returns, and considering opportunities as well into our summary and Q&A. So back to Dilbert, we added a new performance test, but learned that the test itself is flawed. Now our product fails our own tests, and our customers are asking to see the test results. Do I have permission to fake that test data? I didn't even know data can be real. And I laughed when I saw this, because so many times we make decisions or formulate strategy off of data that is flawed. So I really, really encourage you, as you're building tests or you're implementing whatever components of this series, or for those of you that take the next steps, that you really take a step back, because oftentimes we need to take a step back to make things smoother and look and see if your data is real, and do whatever activities around cleansing that data, normalizing the data on the front end, because it can make your life so much easier. So this is an excerpt from ThoughtWorks, that big data techniques and technologies, basically tools that handle massive, messy data. And the key with data is that you want it to be actionable, you want knowledge, and you want insight. And in our current culture, society, technology, we want things faster and faster, and inevitably you want results. And really looking at lean learning principles, how you can implement advanced analytics and get your questions answered, and ultimately automate and optimize and implement into operations continuous delivery methods, and really make your business owners basically kind of involved and integrated into risk. So change is hard. Just a recap into traditionally what happens with data analytics, with traditional audit approaches versus what happens with data analysis, and that you can determine and identify trends faster, continuous improvement. If you're still using a sampling approach, just things to keep in mind, your sample may be valid, but your sample may exclude specific insight into trends because you've skipped so many data points in that particular trend. So I'm a big proponent of just 100% review of data and really optimizing the data to look at it top down, risk-based, to say, okay, what are my top customers? Like in this case, we're talking about AR. What are my top salespeople? So, really directing 100% data approach, but becoming very, very strategic. So this is insight from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the annual report to the nation. And so year over year, they put together a study, and they find that 5 to 6% of revenues of any company's or organization's bottom line is actually linked to fraud. And they separate their surveys or their data into 3 categories of corruption, financial statement fraud, and asset manipulation or asset fraud as well. But the financial statement piece is always the biggest dollars, because this involves people that have the most access, the most motivation, things that are tied to compensation, to bonuses. So there's a lot of human behavior and tendencies around this area. So you can see overstatements, timing differences are huge. So this can start to give you a gauge of schemes, as well as then strategy that you need to formulate. Fake revenue, concealed liabilities and expenses, WorldCom was an example of this. Improper asset valuations. I can't tell you how many companies I see that get merged that the assets haven't been reviewed over 4 or 5 years, or if ever. And with every merger, they get revalued, which then your valuation is also inaccurate. And a lot of times bonuses or buyouts are based off of that. Improper disclosures, and then again on understatement, the same components. So bonus manipulation is huge. So go back to your bonus plans and think about, what I typically see is a department component, an overall company component, and or a safety component a lot of times. And so think about within that bonus structure, especially if it's very high level, what are the ways specifically to today that they can manipulate revenue or AR, and why, senior management or, reporting to analysts or whatever the case is, why or how they would want to manipulate that. Misnegotiations is huge. I had a case with a company where basically we did 100% data analytical review of the contracts and of what was missed according to what was negotiated. However, and that was about $10 million per year, we took it a step further, and we had a very detailed conversation with operations about all the things that the company gives away for free. And when we quantified that, it was at least another $10 million in this particular company per year, because basically sales was just renewing contracts every 3 years on a cycle and was failing to have critical communication with operations. So that was a true add-on to the bottom line. Improper classification, revenue, looking at sales, looking at proper period, overstated sales, and also excessive rates. So looking at what rates are, put in for sales, and also the margins, and making sure, taking it a step forward to say, okay, these are the gross margins that were negotiated, but these are the actual gross margins that are coming in, to see and make sure there's no kickback or issues going on with the sales team. So with strategy insight, with all of those things in mind, you want to have an ongoing contract and customer review. And the other thing you want to do with the contract is periodically review, what's been negotiated versus what's been put into your system for people to bill, whatever rates or item codes or pricing codes or amounts, because I can also tell you that repeatedly I found where items were not entered, or they were entered for too much or too low, and that can also in a lot of industries cause a lot of issues as well with your particular customers, because they're coming in and then auditing what you've actually billed. So ongoing analytical and duplicate review on duplicate sales, customer file. and you want to make sure and look at any price fluctuation reviews. You know, have they modified their price more often than they should? Did it not go through the proper approval process? Who's approving it? Are you comparing it and doing requests for proposals in the marketplace? Do you have, you know, are you in line, you know, competitively, and what value are you providing to your customers? Valid sales and cash review. So this is another area of opportunity. I see so much. So the company, management, sales get super excited about sales. Well, did we actually collect that cash, or is it sitting out there 180 days plus and or a year or two beyond? And to add salt to injury, are you then paying bonuses off of sales that have not been reviewed and analyzed by someone else to make sure those sales reported are valid and that you haven't collected on? So one company I worked with had a customer in Brazil. We had a letter of credit. Everything, you know, was quote unquote on the up and up, but they were still doing work out at the different customer sites, and our accounts receivable with that particular customer had ran up to $9 million. And obviously at some point the company was going to start to be in a cash crunch, and it got to the point that, you know, the company had to start drawing on their line of credit, and they were still doing work with the customer. So thinking about things that you're doing, and are they logical, and or have you even reviewed them? Because just because you see a cash issue or another issue, there's usually root causes, like in this case, continuing to do work at that site, you know, for fear of losing paper money. And, you know, truth be told, there was tons of travel, tons of equipment expenses, you know, that had been expended on that contract, you know, well over $4 million. So not only was the company not collecting, but, you know, the company had actually expended $4 million in that time frame. Back to my kickback comment, you want to make sure that you compare sales versus margins. You really want to look at cutoff and write-off reviews, you know, every quarter, and especially at year end. You know, what sales are being booked, you know, that are quote unquote in alignment with bonuses, you know, segregating and aggregating that by salesperson, by division, and just seeing what anomalies you have. And again, tying it back to the bonus, the compensation, you know, to the region, to the district, to the company, and really strategizing and looking at what are some additional possible manipulation possibilities. So this is just a refresher, looking at, you know, estimate of findings or savings of 3% and some assumptions, assuming a full rollout of data analytics. And this is just, you know, based off market average, things like that. And then looking at, when you look at different providers, and, you know, assuming risk assessments full blown, continuous monitoring, and not including licensing costs, even with an average finding of 3 million, still generating well over a 5,000% return. And you heard me talk about several examples in, you know, as we went through this, where, you know, one example alone that generated 20. So it's really, you don't know 20 million. You really don't know what you don't know until you dig in. And some of the low-hanging fruit that we covered in earlier sessions are definitely in accounts payable, which is the example I use in these average findings, and solely accounts payable. So that just gives you the plethora of opportunities. So again, suggested areas and approach, just to recap: bonus comp and reviews, and sometimes this leads to revision of bonus compensation, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen companies that will pay off of bonuses that have not, sales that have not been collected, and they change that. Analytics by volume, by rates, by period, by write-offs, your top salesperson and write-offs, adjustments by location, comparison to operation, and looking at your contracts and having a project around missed opportunities as well as missed billing, duplicate and journal entry reviews. And journal entry reviews, you want to look at also specifically anybody that's making entries that shouldn't, and especially entries that are happening, and seeing if you need to turn those off in the system and their capability. and entries that happen after period close, but before the actual books close. And then customer and price fluctuations as well. And then here's some steps for you to follow as you go through, the process as well. So summary, AR, just like all the others that we've talked about, provides an amazing opportunity to build value. There's significant missed manipulation and new opportunities. So the other thing is when you go through the contract, obviously it's opening up your eyes to see what you're not billing for. And then just in digging through that data operationally, you can see what else can you offer or do for your customers as compliments, or maybe a new product line or a new service line, and use your customers as a focus group and have them tell you what they want, because they're the check writers. And so if they want something and your competitors aren't providing it, well, what better opportunity to create space for yourself? Evaluate and start with a clean slate, talk to the parties that you need to, and just really remember and realize that, audit is truly no longer a cost center. It is an opportunity center. It just depends on how you frame and create your department. So interested in more, demo, you can email sales@automation.com. Also, if anybody wants more insight into digging deeper with data analysis and or data analytics academies or more, feel free to email me and or shoot me a call or whatnot. And Lindsay, do we have any questions?
Excuse me. Yes, we do. And also, just if you have any questions, go ahead and you can type them in the question bar on the right side of your screen. The one question I had is there a recommended frequency with which you should be analyzing the accounts receivable data?
AR and AP are your most lucrative areas. So you should be, my number one answer is you should build in a continuous monitoring process, because the more you delay in reviewing opportunities or gaps or weaknesses, both on the positive and the negative side, that's truly missed dollars. When you start, because I get it, we all have to start somewhere, I recommend at a minimum you review things quarterly and then get a handle on the test and then determine, okay, what components can we roll into operations? What components do we want to roll into a continuous monitoring type process? What system do we want to use? All of those facets, because ideally you want things preventative, and ideally you want them detected before they happen. And there is, whether it's through continuous monitor, whether it's building in your macros, whether it's exception, through continuous monitor doing exception reporting, all of those things are possible, that depending on your risk appetite, depending on all of that, you may start, putting your toe kind of in the baby pool and start step by step with quarterly. But the results that I've shared with you guys, this was within a year or less, and this was with Smart Analyzer and also Excel on some of them. And this was kind of me testing first the process, testing the tests, testing the exceptions, testing what we found and working within a team, and then saying, okay, this is what we need to prevent, this is what we need to migrate, and it resulted in, like in this particular case, the board getting involved and them creating a whole contracts management department, because the case itself proved that there was a need and the data proved that there was a need. So just to summarize, quarterly, and then you want to get to automating the tests monthly. So that's on the detective side. Then you want to move, so from a strategy standpoint, then you want to move to a preventative side. So you're not cleaning up the mess on the back end.
Thank you.
Keep in mind, just as an added note, relationship matters. Your customers are your lifeline. And if you're going back every quarter and being like, oh, we forgot to bill you for this, this, and this, or like when I did this exercise the first time and we found over $10 million, you can imagine the conversations we were having with customers. They were very, very sensitive. They were very like, hey, if you guys want to go back and offer us anything for this, great. If not, can we move forward and like set up the contract and the process to where we don't miss this anymore, and or we renegotiate. So you don't want to have those conversations every quarter or every year. You want to quickly move to identifying stuff on the front end.
Yes, that is very true. Can you talk a little bit about how you can use IDEA and Smart Analyzer specifically to automate and continuously audit, make an auditing program?
Yep. So something also that I've done, so basically, Smart Analyzer, for those that don't know, is a bolt-on for IDEA. And I'm big on automation. How far can I get before, before we have to, like, what process can we utilize that's already been done? So Smart Analyzer specifically has AR, AP, fixed assets, general ledger, and inventory. And it has predetermined tests in every area. So specifically in AR, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's over 15 tests.
I know that there's 55 total tests, so that sounds about right.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like dividing out the total. So basically, but I remember there's a ton, and they've basically done a lot of the legwork for you, because you can either create all the tests manually for yourself in IDEA, which is going to take you a lot of time, and record the macros and a lot of frustration, or you can get Smart Analyzer and then really focus on normalizing your data on the front end to make sure it matches Smart Analyzer. That's what I have IT departments do. Then you're really hyper focusing on then your step 4. So you can see on my slide right now is filtering the exceptions and then focusing on step 5 to determine what are my valid exceptions, what are my returns, what are my opportunities, what's my fraud, what are my issues. And then once you go through that, so my kind of rule of thumb is go through any test the first time you do it at least 3 times. Because you don't want to cry wolf. You don't want to discover you're sitting in a board meeting and you design the test some way that you like either excluded important information or included information that wasn't relevant. You want to make sure you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. And then you can automate it. So the way that I automated it was we dumped the data from Oracle into SharePoint. Then I had an automatic macro run that's, I recorded a macro in IDEA. Like once I ran through the test several times, filtered the exceptions, because that's going to be a lot of your work. And so then it would automatically run. After the first quarter, we just ran the test, every quarter, and would filter the results, piggyback into external audit, and then we started designing and saying, okay, what components of this needs to go into continuous monitor, what needs to be in operations, where do we have contract issues, where do we want to start preventing like these same issues from popping up every time? Because then you're just focusing on the negative if all you ever do is detect.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I don't see any more questions. So again, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Katrina, for going over the different areas where we should be focusing our data analysis. As I mentioned earlier, we recorded all 5 webcasts from the series, and they will be sent out via email in the next few days. If you have any questions, you can email Katrina directly, or you can email me at marketing@automation.com, and I will make sure that your question gets to the correct person. Again, thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Lindsay.